It's getting warm in southern Nevada, and I cut my hair with a pair of scissors that I found laying in the desert, and without a mirror, though I did look at my phone camera so that I could see. It's probably safe to say that I have a bad haircut. So today I'm going to be making some bread. Plain bread from flour and water with no extra ingredients such as yeast or leavening. It's very easy to make and can be done quickly. Flour is very good to have while traveling or hiking because it's very compact and doesn't spoil. It's possibly the most compact form of carbohydrates, and without leavening it makes very dense and heavy and compact sized bread, and very good too. It's not too hard. So let's go and see how to make this bread very easily over a fire. The first step to making this bread is to add this water, and it doesn't really matter too much how much, because you can keep adding flour to make more dough. The wetter the flour and dough, the more sticky it is, so it's good to just have a ton of flour. So I'm going to mix this up. And I don't like to use a spoon because it sticks to spoons, it sticks to everything. I'm going to mix it up and try and keep adding flour until it's nice and dry. I've stirred the dough to this consistency, and it's still very sticky, so I'm going to add some more flour. And the more flour the better, because that means more bread, and it's good to cook a lot of bread at once to help conserve energy and to conserve firewood. I've kneaded this dough into this big piece of nice dry dough, and it's bad to knead it too much because apparently it makes the bread tougher. I haven't really tried to find out if it's true, but with this I'm just gonna make whatever remainder dough can be made from it, and just add little droplets of water, like tiny amounts of water, at a time, until the dough is a nice and good enough consistency. If this dough gets too sticky, which it currently kind of is, then tiny small amounts of flour can be added to make it drier. Like that. And now I'm just gonna scrape off all this extra stuff like this. And now I have this big piece of dough. And it's nice and great consistency, mixed up well. I've made 3 nice flat pieces of dough. Now I'm going to take this to the fire. Here's my stuff in my nice pot lid, an old rusty piece of metal. And here's the fire pit. It's made like an oven because it's a good way to do it, especially when cooking bread, and it keeps the wind out. So I like to put this stuff over here because I don't want dust to get on my things when I mess with the firewood. So it would be better to store it in a container or something, but it's okay. So now I already arranged this firewood. I'll just start this. Should be nice and dry and start easily if the lighter works. Now after a few minutes of the cooking, the sides are kind of black and it's loose, and it's time to flip it. It's good to cook it for a long time because you want it to cook inside, because this dough is very dense without leavening. But basically when the sides are black, it seems like it would be easy to remove from the pot, then that means it's time to flip. And this lid is very good to have, any kind of lid, because it will act like an oven in there. An oven inside the oven. I cooked this bread for a while, pretty short amount of time actually, and it's probably done, but it's pretty black. But that's okay, because the more done it is, the better. And with this kind of bread, often the black is just on the surface because it's very dense bread. So I'm now going to transfer this to this stone. This will stop it from sticking to the pot. So I'm just gonna do this and cook this piece of dough. And we see the fire has went out. I'm gonna try a little trick here because everything's dry. The fire has restarted and was having trouble blowing on it, but it finally started from the wind after I blew on it a few times. So now, add more wood and put this piece of dough and bread onto the fire. Now I'm going to remove some of this black stuff. This kind of bread doesn't really burn on the inside because it's such dense dough, so that this black stuff can be scraped off. It's even better if scraping it, but this is working currently. Now this bread is nice and scraped, and really good. A little bit of black stuff is totally fine. It tastes like a pretzel, basically. It doesn't really taste burnt. I've scraped the second piece of bread, and it looks good. And I'm keeping these pieces up on top of the oven because so that they can possibly cook more thoroughly if they aren't cooked. An egg could probably be fried on top of that. So my bread is cooked and nicely scraped. Here are all three pieces. There's this one and the third one. I've cooked the bread and it's very tasty. And I like to put cheese on it. And then another thing I like to do is put hot sauce on it. But I don't put the hot sauce on it because I don't want it to spill everywhere, so I just eat it out of a spoon. It's very tasty, and this bread doesn't really need to have the black stuff removed. Maybe if it's a lot like this one, but even with some black stuff on it, it just comes right off usually. And even if it doesn't, it barely tastes like anything because barely tastes bad because the inside is like normal bread because it's very thick. So it doesn't really matter if it's very blackened. Actually, that's kind of how I know if it's ready, because I want this bread to be cooked thoroughly. I don't like to eat raw dough or uncooked dough inside the bread because it's so thick. So if the side is black, then I'll flip the piece of bread over so that it cooks properly, and it doesn't even taste like anything. I could probably, well, this stuff might because it's just so much of it, but like this under part here, I wouldn't have to scrape anything off. If desired, it can all be scraped off pretty well. You can scrape it off vigorously actually, and this one was, but I put it back over on over the fire so that it would cook more. It was actually very white, like here it's blackened again with actual soot from the fire, but the entire thing was pretty white like that. So anyway, it's a very cheap way to have basically a ton of bread. 5 pounds of flour is about $2.50, and probably makes more than 5 pounds of bread because there's water in bread. The cheapest possibly wheat bread, sliced bread, is probably $1.50 for a loaf, which is only 1 pound and 4 ounces usually. So it's a pretty cheap way to eat tons of bread, and good bread too, fresh baked bread. So that is the way to make some bread from unbleached flour, wheat flour. I don't recommend white flour because I think it's what white bread is made from, and that's known to be unhealthy. And it's a pretty awesome thing. It can be done easily over a fire or stove, in an oven, or anywhere.